Hi, and welcome to week 3 of the Calico Cat Quilt Shop's Soundwaves Quilt Along. This week we are going to assemble the block 2, which, if I can find the right page, looks like this. It's literally 4 strips sewn together. 2 of them have the 2.5-inch squares on top of them, and they all come out to the same length. So let's get started. I'm going to show you. Okay, if you remember, I did 1 extra strip of both my 10-inch strips and 12-inch strips. So what I'm going to do is lay them all out quickly and decide which 2.5-inch strip or piece I'm going to put on the ends of them. And I've laid my 12-inch strips aside. And these are the 10-inch strips. And they need to have the 2.5-inch blocks that are left over from before added to them. And I already have a sneaking suspicion this might be the one that I'm not going to use, but we'll see. I'm not a huge fan of this fabric up here either, but it is a darker purple, so I do kind of like having that there. Oh, I forgot one. That's not going to work. Okay, so I'm going to set that right here. And I think I like that together. I might try that. I've got 2 of these. I think I'm going to try that. Yeah, I'm okay with that. And then all I have to do, I'm going to go ahead and get my starter piece going here. And all I have to do is add the 2.5-inch block to one side of the 10-inch strip. And I'm going to chain piece and try and keep everything straight. Using my 1/4-inch seam allowance again, and I'm not sure it's going to make any difference which way we press this again, so it seems like this would be the easiest. So I'm just going to press them all that way. And there we have it. So I'm going to stitch the rest of these together and then we'll start assembling the strips. Okay, now I've got all of my 10-inch strips joined with my 2.5-inch blocks, so now they measure 12 inches. And then what I need to do is take my 12-inch strips and attach them. Now I can do this in any order. If I want, I can piece the 12-inch strips, 2 of them together at a time, and then add 1 of these to each side. It's not going to make any difference at all which order you do it. And I got to decide which colors I want to go together, which I think I'm going to go ahead and plan it out completely so that I don't back myself into a corner and end up with a couple of fabrics that might be the same together. So I will be right back after I decide which way I'm doing this. Okay, I got all my color decisions made. Everything's matched up, and I'm glad I did it because I had to rearrange things just a couple of times to get them the way I wanted. And then what I got to decide is what's going to be less confusing for me for assembling these. But this is how they're going to go. Get that one out of the way. 2 long strips in the middle, and then the shorter strips with the green, or with the 2.5 inch blocks on the outside. So, and if I did a good job of 1/4 inch seams, these should all be exactly the same length. Well, maybe I can get it matched up at all. And since they're a little bit longer, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to get it started. And then make sure I keep it lined up since I don't use pins. And then I'm going to hold the end with this hand and just kind of guide with my left hand, keeping an eye on my 1/4 inch seam. And making sure that I'm looking down this way to make sure I get that 1/4 inch and not right at the needle. Oh yeah, and don't put your finger near the needle while it's stitching. That was a little close. And you can still find ways to assembly line piece this or chainsaw it, whatever you want to call it. Cut my little strings off here out of the way. Whether you do that with multiple blocks at a time, or I think I'm going to do this one next. Get that lined up good. And get it started. And then I'm going to go back, make sure everything is even. And then I can just stitch right down. And I'm going with the seam here so that I'm not having to fight a seam allowance that's in the wrong direction from the direction I'm trying to go. And because these are just straight strips going together, I really don't need to press until I get to the end. I can just keep going and worry about that at the end, and it's easier to get my seams going in all the same direction when I do that. So I'm just going to finish these couple of blocks up here. And again, it really doesn't matter which order I'm sewing them together. I just need to make sure that I've got the seams in the right direction. So this one I need to sew on this side. So line it up there. And with your chain piecing, as long as you don't confuse yourself, it is all good. So I know that these two strips went together. And I have these two strips sitting here that need to go together this way. Just one easy seam right down. Between those two strips. Keeping an eye on my 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then I just want to double check and make sure how these need to go together. Okay, sometimes it might be a little easier to have them pressed before you do this, but it really is going to be easier at the end. So I'm making sure my 2 squares are at the top. And then I can finish these 2 blocks up. Okay. And then what I would do is start with my easiest seam first. Just set my seam. And then set my other seams. And again, this just kind of pushes the threads into the fabric, squishes them down a little bit, makes things a little easier. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get them started a little bit, and then I'm going to flip it over and press. And the easiest way for me is, since the seams go this way, if I flip it this way, then all I have to do is press that way to flatten them out more. But I find it's easier to press them down away from me than it is to try to pull the iron towards me. And I really just want to press. I don't really want to be ironing, or I have a tendency to stretch things out and they may not line up square anymore. And get that one pressed. And then it's just a matter of getting all of them pressed. It has a tendency to want to go towards the last seam that I had, the easy seam that didn't have any other lines going across. So get my seam set. And this one, I pressed everything when it was on the face down. I pushed everything away from me. So I'm going to keep doing that. And in case you haven't worked with nested seams before, I'll kind of show you here what I got going on. Sometimes this is easier than others. That's for sure. Sometimes they don't want to cooperate so good. for some reason. And you just keep working with it till it does what you want. I'm trying to work in slightly restricted space though to keep things here where you can see them. Doesn't help me any, that's for sure. But I think you get the idea. Just trying to iron, not iron, and just press. Okay, so when I have nested seams, what that means is, say these were going together, which I don't know that they are necessarily in the pattern, but what I can do is kind of rub these seams a little bit next to each other, and you'll feel them settle in together and lock. And you can use that to your advantage. Not only does it make it easier to stitch across evenly, but once they lock, it makes it easier to get perfect corners. Or at least, yeah, come closer to having perfect corners more often. Because that can be a real challenge. And if it wasn't for nesting seams together, I know I wouldn't get very many corners right. So that'll kind of help. You can stretch them a little bit. You don't want to stretch too much, but to get them to fit where you need to. But you get the idea of where, you know, where they need to go in order to get a nice corner. That one might be a little bit of a challenge, but we'll get there. Those probably aren't going to go together anyway, but so that's the idea. I'm going to finish up pressing here and we'll go back to the other table and look at all the blocks together. So now we have all of our blocks made. They're all sewn, and now we need to look at our layout, our pattern layout. So layout's going to be a little bit different depending on which quilt you're making. You can see the layout for the runner, the small throw that I'm doing, the medium sized throw, or the large throw. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. Since I'm doing the small throw, I'm going to take a look at that, and I will try to do this so that you guys can follow along. I have my, get to it here. So this one is my 1A block. This one is my 1B block and my block 2. And I find the easiest way to do this, if you don't want to do it on the floor, if you have a bed that you can lay at least some of the rows out, that's kind of helpful. Just so that you can kind of spread everything out and take a look at it. And then, because depending on the number of fabrics you're using, you may want to do some rearranging. So I'm going to see if I can get this laid out so that everybody can see here what I'm doing. And I actually should start this way. So here's my 1B, and then I need a block 2. And I am definitely not going to do that because those are the same fabrics and I don't want the same fabrics next to each other. So I'm just going to change it right now. I like that okay. And then I need a block 1A. And I'm just going to put this one down for right now. And then I need another 1B. I'm going to go with this one. Okay. I'm not going to be doing that because those are the same. Let's just pick another one here. If I can get a hold of it. Let's try this one. I don't like that either because these are too close together. Let's see if this works. Well, now these two are the same. So I guess this is as close as it's going to get because I don't have that many blocks to choose from. So I'm just going to have to go with that. Okay, and then my next row, I need a block 2. And my block 2 needs to be facing down. Got the same problem again, don't I? And now I've got the same here. You can see this can be a little bit of a challenge depending on how things went together. Let's try this one. That may have to work. Okay, so there's my block 2. Then I'm back to a 1B, which is going to be this one. And this time it's flipped upside down from the way it was before. And I'm okay with this. I don't know why. I wasn't before, but I'm okay with that. It's just a small piece. And now I've got a 1A that needs to go upside down. Let's try this one. And then back to a block 2. Let's see what I've got left here. And that is also upside down. And you're going to barely be able to see the next row. Let's see if I can get this up here just a little bit higher. Now starting here, I need a block 1A. And those are my block 2s that are left. And that looks right. I can overlap it a little bit, but you're still not going to be able to see all of it. And I'm going to need another block 1A over here. So I'm just going to put that down for the moment. And then a 1B. And then a block 2 facing this way. It's still a little bit difficult to see. You might be able to see it better than I can, but so here's my purples making my wave this way, and my greens running this way and this way. Now I've got one more row. I know you're not going to be able to see that one, so I'm not going to worry about that for the moment. Once I've got my placement figured out, how I want my blocks arranged, I'm going to take them very carefully to my machine. What I'll do is I'll layer them like this, and I might even take one row at a time if I'm not doing this right near my machine, so that I don't get too confused. And then I'm going to stitch together. And we'll go over to the machine and go ahead and sew a row together, and I can show you. Okay, I've brought all my blocks over to the sewing machine now, so we're going to take a look at assembling blocks. Okay, so what I did is I've got all of my blocks stacked, and then I stacked my rows so that hopefully I keep track of what I was doing. And now it's just a matter of not getting in my way. Not getting in my own way, I guess. So I'm going to set these aside for the moment and work on my first row. And the way I stacked these together, they go like this. So I just put one on top of the other till I got to the first block. So these two are going to go together. And I can use pins if I want. I'd have to go grab them. I just need to remember when I'm stitching which side I need to stitch on. So this is the side that I need to stitch on, and you can see that my seams are actually going in the same direction. They're both pointing this way. So I'm just going to pick one of them and flip it the other way, and I'm just going to finger press it, and it'll be okay. So I'm going to nest them together, get them all nice and even, and if I had pins handy, which I'll go grab here in a little bit, I would probably put a pin right here and then get everything lined up nice. And this, I just need to know that my seam is up, and I might need to keep an eye on that. And then I'm just going to sew down the side. Usually when I've got a seam that's not too far down, it's not such a big deal for me to keep it in place. And then I'm going to stop right after that one. Make sure things are lined up again. And with this one pointing up, but on the bottom, the feed dog should take that, and it shouldn't be a problem keeping it straight. And in order to try to keep things from getting too confusing, because I can assemble these however I want. If I want to go ahead and put these two blocks together and then join the two sets together, I can do that. But just for simplicity's sake, I am going to just do them one at a time. And I don't need to press these until I get done, but I certainly could if I wanted to, since I've got my iron right here beside me. And again, I've got two seams that are both pointing in the same direction, so I'm just going to take this long one, finger press it the other direction. The other, well, it's going to be hard to see on this fabric. I'll try to remember to bring it up later. So getting those two seams together, and that's really all I'm going to worry about at the moment, because I'm going to stop right after I get past that and line the rest of it up. Now this time, this seam is going up, and my presser foot is going to tend to want to push it back this way. And that's when a stiletto or some other kind of utensil is really handy to help keep that in the right direction. So I'm going to go slow to get up to it. The other thing you can sometimes do is if you pull your fabric up just a little ways, so that that little seam meets your presser foot at a slightly different angle, then sometimes you won't need to use a stiletto. But sometimes a little instrument to just keep that in place as it goes under the presser foot is really helpful. You definitely don't want to use your finger, and finger is usually not going to be sharp and pointy enough to get very close. And in case you are worried about getting confused, definitely keep your pattern right next to your machine so you can check the layout and make sure you're going the right way. I need to trim this off. Like here, this one's spun around, so if I don't remember that it goes this way, I need to double check my pattern. Okay. Okay, I went and grabbed some pins because now it is really going to be helpful to pin because I have lots of seam intersections this time. So first I'm going to fold and keep an eye on where I need to be. And in this case, all of my seams are going the wrong way except for this one at the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and match that one up. And when I pin, I tend to pin where the needle is going to get to first. So the top seam. And just run a pin through there. Then after that, I'm going to match these seams up, and again I'm just going to finger press the opposite direction so the seams nest together. It doesn't really matter what pins I use, but and anywhere I have seams that meet, I'm going to nest them together. And pin. Some of them are meeting better than others. And there is a little bit of play. I can stretch just a little bit if I need to. I'll need to with that one. If you stretch too much, though, you will end up with a little distortion in the finished quilt top. You'll end up with little puckers and that kind of thing in places where you don't really want them. So in some cases, it's better for things to just not match perfectly rather than getting puckers and distortions. Okay. Just gonna see. It's really not that easy to see in here either. Sometimes you can tell when you've pressed, like this had been pressed in this direction, but your crease will be just a little bit above that seam line. And that's how you know that you're taking up a little bit more of your seam allowance with your pressing, which can take away from that 1/4 inch. If that makes any sense. So once I got it pinned, I'm just gonna work on my 1/4 inch seam allowance. And when I get to a pin, I'm gonna pull it out. And if I need to, use my stiletto or whatever I've got handy. Now this one looks like it needs to stretch just a little bit. So I'm going to stretch a little and hold it until I get through most of it. And I used to sew over pins, but I'll tell you what, I've broken too many needles, so I don't ever recommend it anymore. And I know it's not generally recommended anyway. It's really not worth shattering the pin, or the needle, sorry, or bending the pin for that matter. It's hard on your machine if you should hit a pin, and if you sew over enough pins, eventually you'll hit one. So I just prefer not to take the risk because, yeah, it's damage the needle plate, damage your machine. It's just really not worth it. So I'm just going to keep going down here. pulling pins out as I go and try to make sure my seams are still nested until I get to the end. And again, this little starter and stopper piece, it keeps your fabric from getting pulled in towards the feed dogs when you put your needle in it and when you get started. It just keeps things a little straighter, and then I don't have to worry about hanging on to the tails as I get started. And what I'm going to do here before I press is I'm just going to clip close to the seam. I'm not going to go all the way through, obviously, but I'm going to get fairly close just so it lays back down nice. And it's really not going to have any effect on anything else. It just kind of is a neater way to do it. If I could otherwise just press that down and let it fold. My preference is that when I look at it from this side, I want to see that seam come through all the way. I don't like to have a little wrinkle in it. And if you decide to stitch in the ditch, it's a little bit more challenging as well. But you can maybe see those corners. Most of them are pretty decent. That one's got a little gap. But overall, not too bad. And from a distance, nobody will ever know. And these, where I only had one that I had to meet together, they came out pretty good. So then I'm going to press these seams. Looks like I've got another one that I could clip here. Gotta get through both layers though. And I'm guessing I had one here as well. Yep. Okay. So then I'm going to set my seams, and sewing the row together, I'm just going to pick a direction, and if I go the same direction every time, then my rows should nest together when I put the rows together. Okay, so I'm going to do one more row for you, and then we'll go on to assembling the rows together. So here are my first two. They have to go together this way. And then I just have to decide which one I'm going to press which direction. If I want to pin it or not. And you notice this time it's going up because I wasn't paying that much attention. So I'm going to use my substitute stiletto to guide that in. Then this one's going up and it's on the bottom, so I should be okay. I'm just going to line everything else up if I can get a hold of it and stitch. And I can kind of feel with my index finger here that this seam is flat, so it's okay. So I'm just going to keep going. Now I gotta make sure I've got everything the right direction. And I know I'm on row 2. So yeah, block 2 should be first. 1B, so 1A is next. And this is the one where I'll have all of my seams that need to nestle right together. And I'll do some pinning on them. I picked this one first because that was the one that was already going in opposite directions. And you might be able to see here, this is where I had an edge that didn't quite meet right. And so I just compensated by putting this piece that's underneath a little bit further and making up for being short. Let's see, I gotta open it up on the back side. A little bit handier for running it through the machine. So I'm going to keep going that way. And these are feeling pretty good. It doesn't feel like I'm going to have to stretch anything. And I'm guessing I should be able to get these matched up pretty well. Get some nice corners. Which is kind of always a nice, satisfying feeling when you can do that. Feel like successful. Okay. And then just stitching up to my pins and holding, and if I want to use my stiletto tool, just to hold that down as it goes under the machine, under the presser foot. There's a perfect corner. There's a perfect corner. That was pretty close. And that one looks like a good corner. So I'm not going to go ahead and put this one on. You guys get the idea, but then this one would go on here. So I hope you're finding success so far in your Soundwaves quilt. We've got the blocks assembled into rows, and next week we will talk about putting rows together and quilting and binding. Thanks for joining. We'll see you next week.